I avoid refined carbohydrates, sugars, starches. All of these foods spike sugar, they spike insulin, they spike a incredibly important, conserved throughout evolution, a primary sensing protein called mTOR that actually affects all the chronic diseases, even affects longevity itself, which is really remarkable.
So of all the lies you list in your book, which is a fantastic read, what's the most egregious lie?
Wow, that's a great question. I think I would start off with the obesity lie, just because most adults, certainly in America, are either obese or overweight, and obesity drives diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, mental illness, drives everything else, all the other chronic diseases in the book. So the obesity lie is what people are told even today from the medical schools I teach at and elsewhere, is that if you want to lose weight, just exercise more and eat less. You know, a calorie is a calorie, just eat fewer calories. And that obviously doesn't work, because we have a tsunami of obesity, as well as on all the chronic diseases in the book that are all tied together and driven by the same factors. But fundamentally, the obesity lie is where it starts, at least.
I think that makes a lot of sense. A couple areas I want to build off of. So one, calories, just a calorie. Let's talk more about that. How should we view calories as we look to fill our fridges and our cupboards with food that, you know, we want to be nutritious and filling and delicious?
Yeah, it's a key question, and this is still hotly debated. A great paper just came out debating this topic, the calorie model of obesity versus a hormone insulin model of obesity. But the calorie model, which is the lie, as I said, you just exercise more. First of all, let's take that a little bit. Well, exercise more. What happens when you exercise? You work up an appetite, right? That's what happens when you exercise. You get hungry. Furthermore, exercise has many, many, many health benefits, but unfortunately, weight loss isn't one of them. And it's very, very difficult. If you look at the calories, you know, I can go out and run for an hour, and I'll burn, 500 calories, and I'll max that out with a single muffin from Starbucks and wipe it out. So exercise is not a good way to lose weight. Let's look at the other one. Then it's just about eat less calories. All calories are equal. Well, we know on the face of it that's not true, just from our own experience. If I eat 100 calories of potato chips, let's say 2 potato chips, things are going to happen to my body that are very different than if I eat 100 calories of hard-boiled egg. I'll feel differently. The nutrients are managed differently. And it comes down to the macronutrients that your audience is probably aware of, the 3 major macronutrients: carbohydrates, which are non-essential, and then the essential ones are fat and protein. They all have different effects on our body primarily through a hormone called insulin, which is, among other things, tells the body to store fat. So carbohydrates, which are primarily the potato chips, when I eat a potato chip, it spikes my insulin. That tells my body to store fat. A lot of the energy goes to fat storage. And guess what? I'm still hungry. I finished the whole package. When I eat 100 calories of a hard-boiled egg, which is primarily fat and protein, it doesn't have this carbohydrate, which spikes insulin. When I eat the hard-boiled egg, I'm usually satisfied, and I don't find a compulsion to eat the entire rest of the dozen, because most of the energy goes to my body for metabolism, because insulin isn't spiked. So this awareness, there's certain foods that will, certain calorie types that will drive literally fat storage, and there are other types that don't. And by choosing certain calories, we can make our bodies store the calories as fat or not, and use them as energy. And farmers have known this for years. You know, when they fatten up their livestock, they feed them primarily carbohydrates, which is the food group that stores fat and increases weight. They don't feed them fat and they don't feed them protein primarily.
And so, this idea of a calorie is not a calorie, and ultra processed foods, hot topic these days. I'm sure you've seen the meme, our listener have seen the meme of, a food today, and there's, 25 ingredients, and it's a processed food. And that food 20 years ago maybe only had 3 ingredients. And a lot of those ingredients you'll see today are emulsifiers. Maybe it's carrageenan, or maybe it's seed oil, maybe it's canola oil. And those are 2 hot button topics. One, the emulsifiers, what's the damage they're doing potentially to the microbiome? I think we have skyrocketing colon cancer rates among those under 40, like we've never seen before. And some people would maybe classify as being healthy. And then you've got seed oil consumption. And that is a hot topic. And so what are your thoughts more generally on seed oils and emulsifiers and how they ladder to metabolic health and ultimately our longevity?
Yeah, there's an interesting observation we make in the book. Emulsifiers and seed oils were not available much before the beginning of the last century, and emulsifiers similarly too. And somebody made the observation that most of us would experience we'd be a lot healthier if we stopped eating any food that wasn't available 150 years ago, which is sort of a sad commentary on our modern food system. In other words, that most of the modern food actually makes us less healthy, and in my opinion, among other reasons, drives the tsunami of chronic diseases that we have. So seed oils in particular are pro-inflammatory. They drive oxidation, and they're harmful in my opinion. The problem is seed oils and by seed oils we mean oils that are concentrated from the seeds. And Kate Shanahan has a nice list of the Hateful Eight that you probably already talked about. But the thing with seed oils is they drive these harmful conditions, and they're even worse when you heat them. And as of 1990, the entire world's largely switched from healthy beef tallow to fry foods to seed oils, which happen to be much cheaper because they're subsidized by farm bills in the federal government with corn and soybean subsidies. So they're actually cheaper than beef tallow, but they have this problem. Beef tallow is stable when it's heated. It's a healthy way to fry food if you're going to fry food. But frying in seed oils, which essentially every place does with very few exceptions now, after McDonald's and Burger King famously changed when the Center for Science and the Public Interest and others lobbied to make this change. Now seed oils are everywhere. All fried foods essentially are made in seed oils, which have these harmful heat effects. But it's not just the fried foods. Almost all our salad dressings now are made with seed oils. If you eat mayonnaise, Hellmann's mayonnaise, 100% mayonnaise is made with seed oil. And then the message gets even cloudier because you have what appear to be reputable institutions like the American Heart Association recommends on their website that seed oils like canola oil are heart healthy, and they put it on bottles of foods and everything else like that. But if you examine the history of the American Heart Association, they were funded in the middle of the last century from a large grant from Procter & Gamble, which is the #1 maker of Crisco, which is one of the original seed oils. So their whole existence, at least in their large growth, was driven by this grant from a seed oil company. And then, out of fairness, the American Heart Association, and this is a whole nother topic, but they believe that LDL cholesterol is pretty much singularly responsible for heart disease, and seed oils do lower the LDL cholesterol. And that's the basis of their recommendation. But in my opinion, as we talk about in the book, LDL cholesterol is not really the villain. that it's made out to be in heart disease. There are other things that are much, much worse that we can control. And furthermore, seed oils in themselves are harmful. So the bad effects, in my opinion, outweigh the good effects. I think everybody should avoid all seed oils for that reason.
So, how would you describe your nutritional philosophy? How do you eat?
Great question. Well, in the book, I go through kind of the model of what I'm thinking of why, what I eat and why I ate, and how I was able to reverse these 4 chronic diseases that I got myself, that my doctors prescribed medicines for, and I was facing a lifetime of pharmaceuticals. So I basically look at nutrition as a way to improve metabolic health. And there are other factors as well, like sleep and exercise, but nutrition is really foundational. So the the key pillars for my nutrition are really 3 things. The first thing, before I get into the 3 things, is the fact that I stop eating all the time. So most of us are told, snacking is healthy. We should do it, keep energy in our bodies. My mom was a dietitian. I was immersed in that message. But the first thing I did was stop snacking, cut out between meal snacks. I actually do intermittent fasting. So, if you want, you can skip breakfast, even skip lunch too. And I have 1 meal a day when my kids get home from school, and I've never felt better. My mind is clear, but you don't have to do that. There are other things you can do by changing what you eat. So the three pillars of what I eat are, first of all, I avoid refined carbohydrates, sugars, starches. All of these foods spike sugar, they spike insulin, and as we talk about in the book, they spike incredibly important, conserved throughout evolution, a primary sensing protein called mTOR that actually affects all the chronic diseases, but even affects longevity itself, which is really remarkable. So cutting out carbohydrates will lower the glucose spikes, will make me much more metabolically healthy. So carbohydrates is the first thing. Second thing, as we've already talked about, I avoid seed oils. So those are industrial processed oils that are highly pro-inflammatory, oxidative, and when they're heated, they make literally toxins that damage our body. And then the third thing I do is grains. I avoid grains. And to be clear, I don't have the disease of an allergy to gluten called celiac disease that some people have, where they can't eat any grains at all. But I believe that for many adults, that the proteins in grains drive an inflammatory reaction that results in low-grade inflammation that is harmful. Inflammation causes aging, it causes metabolic abnormalities. So by avoiding grains, I avoid this inflammatory process. But also, if you live in the United States, most grains are soaked in a toxic weed killer called glyphosate, which is illegal in 35 countries around the world because of its they believe it causes cancer. And finally, grains tend to have high carbohydrates. So that goes back to the first pillar, because they spike our insulin and spike our glucose. But those are the 3 guidelines with food. And that sounds like a lot of information. The simple way is just to avoid junk foods, because junk foods are full of seed oils, they're full of carbohydrates, and they're usually full of grains as well.
I opt for a great organic sourdough if I'm going to do grains. So you mentioned your mom and your ability to essentially reverse these chronic diseases that you were facing with. Can you talk a little bit about your personal story, your parents, and then your own kind of health crisis that led to, I think, the inspiration for the book?
Sure. My mom was a dietitian, so I was immersed in the ideas of nutrition and how it helped. Unfortunately, she was following the nutritional wisdom that dietitians have, which follows the food pyramid, low fat diets, high carbohydrate diets. We didn't eat butter. We substituted margarine, which we thought was healthy, which is full of seed oils and other things. But I've since, at least it made me appreciate nutrition. Fast forward, I went on to medical school. I became a physician. I spent my essentially my whole career in medical schools, teaching, having the privilege of teaching doctors and students, as well as practicing medicine, as well as doing research. I mean, I admit I've written a couple hundred peer-reviewed scientific papers. My laboratory has received millions of dollars in grants from drug companies and device makers and the federal government. So to be clear, I'm not really a conspiracy theorist. I'm an insider. I'm part of the establishment. I'm part of the medical establishment. And I'm looking at this from the inside. And the book is critical of Western medicine, but I want to say that I believe in Western medicine. That's what I do in my job. In the 20th century, Western medicine transformed our lives largely through public health measures, infectious diseases. The pills and surgeries that were invented then were life-saving. And even today, if I get hit by a car and have an acute emergency, I want Western medicine, the doctors to remove my spleen and give me a blood transfusion and all these other things. The problem is, and what the book talks about is that in the 21st century, we're now facing, like I said, a tsunami of these weird chronic diseases that were around in the 20th century, but nowhere near the numbers we hear. You mentioned colon cancer. Well, it's all across the board. Everything I mentioned, all the way from diabetes to mental health issues, Alzheimer's, the whole list, they're all exploding. And the problem is when Western medicine takes the same pills and surgery that were so successful in the 20th century and applies them in the 21st century to these chronic diseases, it doesn't work. In other words, the pills and surgery may be life-saving in the short term. So, the insulin may help the diabetic not die from a glucose hyperglycemia. But the problem is the pills and surgery, for the most part, treat the symptoms of these diseases, but they don't get to the underlying root cause. And the point of the book is the underlying root cause, there actually isn't a pill or surgery for it. But on the good news, the underlying root cause, the metabolic health, is something we can all do with our lifestyle changes, specific diet, specific exercise, and there's specific things that we can do. And I became interested in this. I'd like to say, well, I wanted to help mankind. It wasn't that at all. I was doing my own thing in medical school and in teaching, and I suddenly came down with 4 chronic diseases. And I was diagnosed with these. A doctor put me on prescription medicines, and my doctors, 4 prescription medicines. And I asked them, hey, what about lifestyle? Is there anything I can do? And they go, nah, it doesn't really work. You're going to be on these drugs for the rest of your life. And my kids were small. I realized this wasn't going to end well. So out of self-interest, then I did a deep dive and learned that there are many things that I wasn't aware of. And many of my colleagues, even now, who are, still teaching at medical schools, are not aware of the breakthroughs that have happened literally in the last few years in our understanding of these chronic diseases and the common root mechanisms and how we can reverse them. And long story short, I adopted some of these and I was able to reverse all 4 chronic diseases. My doctors couldn't believe it. They thought the labs were wrong. And I got off all medicines through this program. And that's the idea with the book. I want other people not to make the same mistakes I made and hopefully share this information with them.
I know it's in the book, but can you share the 4 chronic diseases you were facing?
Sure. Yeah, I'm perfectly open on it. It's interesting because there were four diseases that in the face of it seemed to be very, very different, and they were handled differently. One was an arthritis called gout. Another one was high blood pressure or hypertension. And today, almost half adults have this hypertension. It's exploding as well. The third one was dyslipidemia, and that's a problem with blood lipids, that your blood lipids are out of whack. And this is a very common finding as well. And then the last condition was a glucose abnormality, and it was a pre-diabetes. In other words, I was approaching diabetes, and it seemed like these 4 conditions were unrelated. And indeed, that's how they were treated with modern medicine. Everything is siloed. You have a joint specialist that deals with arthritis. You have a, endocrinologist who deals with the glucose. And then you have somebody else who deals with the blood lipids. But in fact, And this is what the book talks about. They're all related to an underlying metabolic abnormality that the pills or surgery don't really work for. And the pills that I was taking would lower my blood pressure and remove the symptoms for these other diseases. But the problem was, for the most part, many of the chronic progression of these diseases continued, and that's the problem. But when I reversed them with lifestyle factors and actually got off the drugs, it's possible to reverse or slow down the progression of these diseases, and that's really the message.
What do you think had the most significant impact in the reversal, and how quick was that reversal?
I mean, nutrition can't be underestimated because it's the medicine we all take every day, almost all of us, every person on earth. And it's a choice we make every morning. We decide what we put in our mouth and when we eat it. But it's a great question. For each of the things we do, the three pillars that I mentioned, changing your carbohydrate intake, your starches, which affects directly glucose, insulin, and the prediabetes, you can see the effects on that in 24, 48 hours. You can see it within a week. You'll start feeling better. If you go into this healthy metabolic state called ketosis, that can happen fairly quickly, and you'll begin getting health benefits from that very fast. Removing seed oil or removing grains next, because of the grains' effect on the immune system, this effect takes about 90 days to wash out. So if someone's going to try, say, hey, I heard grains are bad for you, this pro-inflammatory thing, I'm going to try it. If I have irritable bowel syndrome, or I have polycystic ovary disease, I have acne, any number of a whole list of conditions, and you want to try removing things, you want to try removing grains, you've got to do it for about 90 days before you see the effect. It's not like, oh, I quit grains for 2 weeks and I didn't feel any different. Well, with grains, it's about 90 days. And then finally, with seed oils, it's even much longer, because they're integrated literally into our fat and our cell membranes. So it can take many months there.
That one always scares me. Like, oh God, if I really, the seed oil is going to take me forever to, because they're in, the way I kind of view seed oils is like, we try to avoid them in our house, but if we go out to eat, it's probably going to happen. There are some restaurants here in Miami that are incredible that don't have seed oils, and we'll try to go there as much as possible. But every once in a while, it's going to happen.
I'm thinking now I mix up my own salad dressing when I go someplace and then apply it that way. I don't know what you do.
Jason Walkup here, founder and co-CEO of mindbodygreen and the host of the mindbodygreen podcast. Please subscribe. You'll never miss a show and you won't regret it. Well, there are still some great ones. True Food Kitchen, which is all over the country.
Oh, is that no seed oils?
No seed oils, tremendous. Our kids love it.
I love that.
True Food Kitchen, amazing. Here in Miami, there are a couple places. Elastica, which is incredible. Chef Joe Anthony, no seed oils. And then here in Coconut Grove, where we live, we've got Cruz Kitchen and Los Felix that don't use seed oils too. So like it's starting to happen. More and more restaurants. There's Seed Oil Scout, the app where you can look at the restaurant. It's incredible. But it is never underestimate the power of food and how quickly. And I've done my own N of 1 experiments where I've had labs turn around in 90 days, like crazy drops in terms of lipid panels, ApoB going from 110 to 71 in 8 weeks. So it is really incredible. And I think something I want to talk about, you are part of the medical establishment. You are not on the fringe. You are not an influencer. You are in the establishment. And I think this conversation specific to longevity is so fascinating right now, where you've got the intersection of lifestyle modification, a lot of which you point out in the book, whether that's nutrition, exercise, sleep, the list goes, environmental factors, list goes on, with pharmaceutical intervention. And those worlds, I think 10 years ago, in our more of the holistic space, there would be a lot of skepticism, and rightfully so, around pharmaceuticals, and there still is, and there should be skepticism across everything with regards to your health. Healthy skepticism, I like to say. But we sit at this time where more and more are embracing this view that, lifestyle, I'm going to dial it in on lifestyle, but maybe that's only going to get me to 80% or 90% of achieving my maximum health span. But I can layer on this pharmaceutical over here that can get me to 100%. And I'm going to try it. And what's your view on where we sit there?
I think citizen science can make a great number of, is important for contributions. By citizen science, I mean N of one. I mean self-experimentation, and I'm not advocating anyone discontinue your prescription medicines without talking to your doctor, but in conjunction with your health team, try things that make a difference. I think it's very powerful. The biohacking movement. I was just down with Dave Asprey in Austin, and he does a lot with biohacking. And yeah, I just got approached to be on the cover of Biohackers magazine, and I think, yeah, why not? I think it's good. I think it's a great movement. So I'm supportive of it. And in a sense, a lot of the stuff I was doing with my own life was biohacking. I was, changing my environment, changing my lifestyle, and all these things to see the beneficial effects. But your question, I think, is a great one, because so let's see, you've done the nutrition things, you've identified any deficiencies you've had, you replace them with supplements, you identify toxicities, you remove those, your sleep is good, your exercise is good, your stress is good, your mindset's good. What's next? And I think they're very, very powerful things that work on many of the same metabolic pathways and different ones that we can affect with lifestyle. And we touched on mTOR, which is this fundamental signaling molecule that a healthy lifestyle can affect in a positive way. Well, there's actually a drug that is the number one longevity drug, the single pharmaceutical that has the arguably, as of today, it produces lifespan benefits in every single animal system it's been tested on repeatedly. Humans, we haven't done the tests, although rapamycin is the name of the drug. It's been used in humans. It's actually FDA approved for many, many conditions, but it turns this important metabolic switch into a favorable position. So you can do it with lifestyle, but you can also do it with rapamycin. What happens when we turn it into a favorable position? I'll just touch on it. If you give it to mice, they live 20% longer. Their lifespan literally increases 20, and flatworms and yeast and fruit flies. And there's even a project with dogs now. And many, many humans are taking rapamycin off label. I mean, I take rapamycin for that as well. But what evidence is there? Why is this such a fundamental molecule, this mTOR? And it's interesting because mTOR affects almost every one of the chronic diseases that we've talked about. In other words, and it's actually FDA approved for many of them. Statistically, the number one killer for you and I and most of our audience, statistically, we're most likely to die of a heart attack. That will determine our longevity. And then the list goes on from there: strokes, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and you can look it up online. The list goes down from there. But interesting, rapamycin, this weird drug that turns mTOR into a favorable position, is actually FDA approved for heart disease. And how does that work? Well, heart disease is a great example of treating the symptoms, but not the underlying condition that we referred to earlier. If I have a heart attack today, and a heart attack is where your arteries that supply the blood typically get clogged off, and blood doesn't get to the heart, and that causes the heart attack or myocardial infarction. If I have a heart attack today, the most likely thing I will get is a treatment, which is a stent. It's a mechanical tube that's placed in the blood vessel that was clogged off, and they open it up again, and the stent holds the blood vessel open. It's a mechanical thing that holds the blood vessel open, and that is the standard mainline treatment today for a heart attack. And I've had friends who have a heart attack, and they go, "Wow, I went to the hospital, I got a stent, they saved my life. Thank God I don't have to worry about heart attacks anymore. They fixed the problem. And that in itself is a problem because, like so many of the pills in surgery today, the stent, arguably may have saved that person's life acutely in the moment, but statistically, stents don't improve your overall survival when you put a stent in the blood vessel. In other words, it doesn't change your overall lifespan. And in fact, why is that? The stents mechanically open the vessel, but the disease that causes heart attacks in most cases is something called atherosclerosis, which is narrowing of the blood vessels. And the stent does nothing for atherosclerosis. In other words, that underlying metabolic condition, the atherosclerosis, continues in all the other blood vessels of the body. And even the stent itself will tend to clog off after a while. Well, one of the indications for rapamycin, and people said these stents clog off after a while. One of the indications for rapamycin is to coat the stents with rapamycin, and they don't clog off anymore because rapamycin stops or slows the atherosclerosis there. But the key thing is, what this illustrates is the acute intervention, the pills, the surgery, maybe saved the guy's life, but his disease progresses on and continues to go on. Well, how do you fix the underlying disease? It's not with a statin. It's actually with this lifestyle change, changing all the factors we talk about in the book. And those same factors will lower his risk for obesity, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, cancer, and even mental illness.
So how does one assess if they're a good candidate for rapamycin?
The way rapamycin works is by turning mTOR down. mTOR is a metabolic switch. It's a survival switch. I said it's conserved over billions of years of all the way from yeast to humans. So it's a critically important fundamental molecule. And when rapamycin is turned on, it tells when nutrients are present. It senses nutrients. And when nutrients are present, rapamycin turns on and it tells the cell to grow. So to proliferate and grow. And that's a good thing, right? So you need mTOR turned on. We all do. And then when mTOR turns off, when there are no longer nutrients present, it tells the cell, don't grow. Because if you grow and there's no nutrients, you're going to die, right? So it tells the cell not to grow, but also do an important thing called autophagy, which is repair and healing and utilizing the existing things. So normally in a healthy person, mTOR turns on and off and on and off. That's the healthy situation. But for a number of reasons in modern society, and as we get older, in fact, mTOR is turned more and more into this on position, this growth position, which is healthy when we're growing up, as before we reach adulthood, when our bones are growing, our brain's maturing. Growth is good. But as it turns out, as we get older, when growth is turned on, it causes other things to happen. Like atherosclerosis is an overgrowth of cells in the blood vessels, is a simple way of thinking of it. Cancer is an overgrowth of malignant cells in the body. Even Alzheimer's disease is a hyperfunction or overgrowth of inflammation in the brain and other neurodegenerative diseases. So turning down mTOR into this beneficial state allows repair to occur, and it decreases the risk for all these chronic diseases. So there are FDA approved indications for rapamycin for cancer. There's about 8 cancers that rapamycin is used for. Cardiovascular disease, we already mentioned that. When you give it to Alzheimer's animal model, it reverses cognitive decline, and now the University of Texas is doing a multi-million-dollar study in rapamycin for Alzheimer's disease. And on and on and on. So it's a really powerful drug.
So it's it's essentially like what's one of the hallmarks of aging. And so like in your view, is this something someone should consult with their doctor in their 50s or 60s? Or if you start to see a certain pattern in lab work, maybe you should have a conversation. Like when should someone start to think about it?
First of all, a general observation about all these chronic diseases, If you wait until your doctor says you have Alzheimer's, you have diabetes, you have cancer, you've missed a huge opportunity for treatment. I won't say it's too late, but you're at a disadvantage because all of the diseases I mentioned begin years to decades before the doctor diagnoses them. In other words, the marker for diabetes, the HA1C, rises like this, but your doctor doesn't call it diabetes until it reaches here. So, and similarly, there are things that happen with Alzheimer's that, before you start forgetting your keys and not remembering your kids' names, a lot of things happen decades beforehand. And same thing with cardiovascular disease and all these things. So we shouldn't wait necessarily for a lab abnormality or even for the doctor to tell us that. There are proactive things we can do with our lifestyle that will delay the onset of these diseases. So the question is, how soon or when do you want to start a drug like rapamycin? Well, first of all, I always put the disclaimer, I would never take a drug like rapamycin without first optimizing my lifestyle. In other words, as powerful as rapamycin is, there are more powerful things with our lifestyle that we probably don't understand now that can have dramatic effects. As an indication, rapamycin has this 20% improvement in lifespan, right? There's another drug, another FDA-approved drug called acarbose, that when you give it to the same animal models, the mice, they get, a smaller percentage, 5 or 10%. But when you combine rapamycin with acarbose, you get a much greater percent than either rapamycin or acarbose. So what does that mean? Well, it tells us that this is really, it's complex stuff. There are synergies that we don't even understand. A friend of mine said that, metabolism isn't rocket science. It's much more complicated than it is.
Where do you think we're going to be in a couple of years? Let's just say this combination, one adds 20%, another adds 10%. And if my, say, health span was clocking in at 80 because I've dialed it on lifestyle, or, if I add another, I just added 25 years, 30 years, that's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I think we are seeing dramatic increases in lifespan. Despite the tsunami of these chronic diseases, there is the possibility to dramatically increase our lifespan, and that's a good thing, right? People say, "Oh, why do you want to have a bunch of old people? Why do you want people to live longer?" Well, birth rates are dropping. When I was growing up, we were worried about overpopulation. It was a population explosion, and now, countries like China and Italy and Japan and are having falling birth rates where they're literally losing people. So,
Well, quality too. No one wants to, it sounds like it's quality of life too. We're not spending, ideally, no one wants to spend the last 20 years of their life in a wheelchair, in and out of doctor's appointments on multiple medications. It's about increasing the quality.
that's a great point. It's quality. So assuming it's normal quality, like your 50-year-old quality for another 50 years, some people, there's some pushback on that. I'll go to people, I go, hey, you're 65. How'd you like to live another 30 years? And they go, well, that'd be great. I play a lot of golf. I visit my grandkids. Well, guess what? They won't be grandkids. They'll be your great grandkids by then. And you'll probably be, golf will get old. No judgment against golf. I'm a miniature golfer myself, but, or you may get tired of your grandkids. But the point is, I think longevity, it's not about extending retirement. It's about, imagine your life between 30 and 60 or between 20 and 50, how you developed as a human being, how you changed, how you develop purpose. Now take that extra period and put it on the end and imagine how you would transform. And I'm not saying spend 30 years on the golf course, but I'm saying have a new career, do something else, gain wisdom. There's a lot of value in older people with wisdom that the world, sadly is short on wisdom right now.
You're touching on another point, and you brought up this word earlier, and I want to come back to it: mindset.
I think it's one of the most important single factors of a healthy metabolic state is the mindset. In fact, you can You can correct your diet, your nutrition, all those things. You can take all the rapamycin in the world, but if you don't have the right mindset, and what does that mean? It's a sense of purpose. It's a sense of looking at the world where you're excited and energized, that you want to give back to the world. You're grateful. These are really, really important things. And mindset is one of the most important ones, I think.
100% agreed. We touched on a lot today. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to touch on before we wrap?
Wow. Sometimes people ask me, you go, well, you wrote this book about, all the, how you can reverse these chronic diseases, but how the healthcare system is not helping people get this message out. And aren't you depressed by this? And how does that make you feel? And actually, I'm hopeful. I'm excited. I think we're entering into a new era of patient doctor relationships, because before, as a patient, I would go to my doctors and they would prescribe things for me and I'd take them, right? And I'd follow their orders. I think nowadays, as we understand health better and these metabolic factors, the doctor can't fix my lifestyle. A doctor can't make me healthy. A doctor can make me less sick. But the lifestyle decisions that are going to reverse my metabolic disease are something that I have to take charge of. I have to take agency of. So the doctor can recommend things, and doctors have a lot of training. I know I went through a lot of it myself, but the best doctor in the world doesn't know my story, me as a patient, like I do. In other words, how many decades of life I had with, childhood trauma and, fracturing the bone at a certain age, or a weird thing that happened to me. That's not going to be in my hospital chart. And certainly the doctor's not going to be able to review it in 7 minutes, which I have for the thing. So it's an exciting time of new agency and patients taking control of their own lives. Sure, they're going to need doctors, but I think it's a new era we're entering into. Like I said, when I get up every morning, I'm in charge. I get to make decisions about the lifestyle that's going to affect my life. What I put in my mouth, when I exercise, when I sleep, even the way I view the world. Is it a loving place? Is it a place of hope and opportunity? Or is it stressful and dangerous? And, I get to create the reality I experience. And this is an exciting time, because it's going to change us all forever for the better.
Well said. A message of hope and optimism. And I will hold up the book, Lies I Taught in Medical School. Fantastic read. Robert, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jason. I love your program and the work you do. So thank you for that.